In this video, we wanted to go over the process of getting the walls in and the van starting to actually look like a real thing. Although we didn't get any footage of us cutting or gluing in the wheel well panels, this is how they looked once they were done. As you can see, there's a gap between the floor panels and the wall because we wanted to do a double rabbet joint between the walls and the floor to get as much glue surface as possible. Doing a double rabbet joint was great in theory, but incredibly difficult in execution and required a lot of router bits. We used a combination of a circular saw and a router to cut both the floor and the wall panels. The router made an insane mess, and although we did eventually realize that we could just buy an attachment and connect it to the vacuum, we spent many days getting covered in fiberglass particles and foam bits and cleaning up for hours just like this. Unlike the easy and fairly rectangular floor, in order to make the walls fit into the joint perfectly, we had to cut out almost the exact shape of the wheel wells for the walls. To get it as accurate and flush as possible, we made a cardboard mock-up of the wheel well, then a particle board mock-up, and then finally used that to create a very accurate cut for the wheel wells.
So right now we're working on test fitting the panel. Essentially how this process works is we just use this double-sided tape, lay it down along the whole side, and then get the panel in and essentially just practice clamping it up. Since the glue, we really only have 20 minutes of working time, we try to do it fast and have this all planned out. So we're doing a mock glue up right now. We don't actually have any glue in, we're just testing the clamping. Essentially, we put this beam across the bottom here, anchored it to the seat bolts, and then did another beam across the top, anchored to the garage. Basically, the idea is we're going to be clamping that wall outward and kind of getting even clamping pressure. I also 3D printed these little shims, which we can basically stick in the edge here to keep the spacing even when we remove the clamps.
On the exterior side of the walls, we taped the edge of the aluminum and the panel, leaving a slight gap so that when the excess glue squeezed out, we could smooth it down and use it to caulk between the panel and the exoskeleton. To sand the aluminum, we actually switched to 120 grit sandpaper because we thought that 80 was too abrasive and was creating a lot more snags in the cleaning process. To sand the panel, we used 80 grit and we're essentially just looking to take the gloss off and to create some texture for the glue to hold on to. Both were cleaned as thoroughly as possible using a lot of isopropyl alcohol and paper towels before being examined and tack ragged. Then we evenly placed the spacer tape on the aluminum and wiped activator on both the panel and the aluminum. And then it was time to glue. We laid a fairly thick bead to ensure that there was both enough coverage and squeeze out to caulk with after putting the wall in place. The glue is a single part PU adhesive that is moisture curing, and according to the manufacturer, it cures at a rate of 3 millimeters per 24 hours. However, we did multiple test samples and found that it was curing much slower for us, so we decided to leave each wall clamped for 72 hours and to wait a full week before we drove it out. Realistically, we probably didn't need to wait anywhere near this long, but better safe than sorry when it comes to the structural integrity of your future home. So here's a time lapse of us putting the second wall in. After laying down the glue bead, it took 4 people and our suction cups to lift it and carefully place the bottom edge into the double rabbet joint. Unfortunately, there's no footage of anyone caulking because we all had too much glue on our fingers to actually hold a phone and take any videos. And finally, it was time for the 2 little walls. They got just as thoroughly cleaned and sanded like the others, although the cab wall had no joint of any kind cut into it, which made it a lot simpler in many ways. It was also a lot smaller and lighter, as you can see, so it was really nice to finish out the entire process on that wall.
So we just finished clamping gluing in the back wall and then this front cab wall. You can see this absolutely ridiculous gluing structure we built. We basically did this so we can press out in that direction for that wall and then press out this way for the wall. And this whole contraption is braced to the garage itself. You can see we have an absolutely ridiculous amount of clamps. For the cab, we wanted to do a full pass through, so you can see we have the opening which closely follows the lines of the original cab. And then to seal this, well, one, there's the glue, and then we also, just for looks, added this, it's hard to see, this bulb seal, which basically goes all the way around. And then we'll end up putting some trim on this edge so it's not exposed. But yeah, it's a massive glue bead that goes between this front wall and the cab, which is really great because that'll add a little bit of flexibility and allow the two to move slightly between each other.
And here she is as a nearly completed box. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to build the pop top before we had to leave for the 4x4 conversion, but at least from the ground it looked pretty complete. We can't wait to start building the pop top next and to show off how sexy the van is now that UJoint did a full makeover on her. We'll see you next time.